Okay, just wanted to do a review of Sir Roger Penrose's latest talk from April of 2004 at another Science of Consciousness meeting, and he's been given the same talk several times, but he keeps on changing it slightly, making little remarks that make it always interesting to hear. So he says it seems to go backwards. He's talking about free will and quantum consciousness, and he says it seems to go backwards in time, which is kind of a strange idea. It's worse than instantaneously. It propagates backwards. And so it's a 40-minute talk. So he's tying this in with the microtubules and the tubulin. So then he starts about 35 minutes, and he discusses the Benjamin Libet precognition experiment, where they do a finger stimulation and then see how long it takes for the brain to sense it. But then when they stimulate the brain directly, it actually takes longer to sense the stimulation. And so if they stimulate the finger first and then the brain stimulates is later, it actually cancels out the finger stimulation that happened before. And so he says the brain stimulation, even though it was later, somehow cancels out the finger stimulation. How is it that the later brain stimulation somehow seems to wipe out the earlier stimulation? Now, normally we think of this as what he just calls muscle memory, and he's like, well, it's unconscious because your finger stimulation is faster. But what he's saying is that actually the consciousness is what he calls the collapse of the wave function, that actually is inherently retroactive because that moment of collapse is the moment of self-awareness, but it is also non-local, that the collapse happens in a retroactive causation. So he says it's an intrinsic retroactive. The actual decision, which is the equivalent of the collapse of the wave function, could be conscious, yet somehow is retrocausal, goes back in time. And he says that this, as an example, to explain free will, that this is based on quantum realities which are not random and which are way beyond anything we can think of now. And so this is the actual experiment that he's referring to, the Benjamin Libet. So now what's interesting about this is that Basil J. Hiley actually gave a presentation to Roger Penrose. Let's see if I can get it up here. Yeah, here we go. So Basil J. Hiley, Roger Penrose, and Stuart Hameroff were at this talk, at this conference. Okay, it's weird because the videos, they're unlisted, so you can't find it through the
An honor to be here.
Through the channel. They're on there. It's just that you have to know the link ahead of time. But at any rate, at the end of this talk, Basil J. Haley says, well, he's saying to Roger Penrose that you should, if you understand non-commutativity, then there's no reason to Basil J. Haley just ended his talk and then they went to lunch. But if you understand non-commutativity, then there's no need to have this collapse of the wave function, and you can maintain the quantum non-locality that's precognitive. You can maintain it as at the macro level, on the biological scale, the macro level. And what Roger Penrose is saying is that you have to gravitize the quantum, and that's why it's not quantum gravity. Now, the reason he's saying gravitize the quantum is because he's saying that the quantum reality is not the strong reality. It's a weak collapse, and then the strong reality is the gravitational space-time causation, and that's why you don't have this time loop paradox. And he's saying that this is assuming that special relativity is correct, for Einstein's relativity. Now, the problem with this is that Einstein's relativity is based on observation, but in quantum biology, if you're relying on listening, then you can actually have a superluminal resonance that's non-commutative. And that's how you get beyond the Einstein-Rosen paradox, and as the critique of quantum physics, is if you rely on listening as logical inference instead of observation. And in terms of the Penrose-Hameroff model, what they've shown is that the microtubules, they have the strongest resonance at the ultrasound, and that's quantum coherence as super radiance. But you can actually listen to ultrasound as the highest pitch. You can hear externally. When you listen to it internally as meditation, that actually resonates the brain as ultrasound. And so that's only discussed in tinnitus research. So I doubt that Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose are aware of that. But quantum biology researcher Dr. F.E.P. Chow, she referred to this. And so does Manfred Euler, the German physicist. I've corresponded with him also about this. He talks about the right and left ear being quantum phase coherent as equivalent of the double slit experiment. And so Roger Penrose, he's talking about the double slit experiment also in this latest talk. So if you listen to Penrose's latest talk, he's talking about the light cone being precognitive as the equivalence principle. In other words, he's saying that the quantum consciousness actually violates the equivalence principle. And you find this also in Gerard de Hooft and Martin Vandermark's article, Light is Heavy. And this is an image from that where they're relying on de Broglie's law of phase harmony to explain that because the momentum is directly proportional to the frequency, you have a anti-gravity effect based on non-commutative frequency, because the mass, the gravitational mass of the photon is based on an average that's the center of the mass, but in reality the photon and the time are non-commutative, and that's why you get this gravitational mass of light, because you're having a superluminal, what Louis de Broglie called the law of phase harmony. And it also means that because of the intrinsic one-half spin or non-zero spin, then it means that all matter is actually made of light. That also has this superluminal effect. So here, Martin van der Mark, he gave a talk based on the paper that he had co-authored with Gerard de Hooft. So he's basically explaining the Louis de Broglie law of phase harmony. So once again, he's saying as the light momentum increases its frequency, the relativistic clock has time slowing down, or time gets bigger as it slows down. And that's what, so in other words, you are gravitizing the quantum, because the origin of quantum physics actually is from the fact that there's no simultaneity at the speed of light, and instead you get this retroactive causation due to the time frequency difference between internal and external space-time. And so Gunther Nimps, he did these experiments where, once again, he's showing the difference between the center of mass, which is red, and so you get this superluminal retroactive signal. And he was able to tunnel Mozart faster than the speed of light, using this same concept from Louis de Broglie's frequency, so where the information is directly tied to the frequency. And so I'm not going to go into all the details of this because I don't remember it right now, and I'd have to study it first to explain it well, but I've done other videos on this. But when you get back to Basil J. Hiley, and basically his advice to Roger Penrose is to focus on non-commutativity, and Roger Penrose, he admits that the foundation of reality is non-commutative for his palatial twistor model. And so what Roger Penrose is saying, that this whole belief that the quantum collapse of the wave function, also called wave decoherence, destroys quantum effects. But that's because of this wrong Schrodinger algorithm, the wave function algorithm. And Roger Penrose admits that the Schrodinger wave function algorithm is incorrect. But Roger Penrose has not been able to make the leap into non-commutativity, because it challenges Einstein's relativity, because it shows that there's this deeper non-local quantum precognitive reality that actually creates space-time. And so Basil J. Hiley is saying, we should direct our attention towards the dynamical structure conditioned by non-commutative geometry. And that's what Alain Kahn just calls 2-3 infinity, because that's the simplest explanation from music theory of this non-commutative time and frequency as non-locality. So So this is Roger Penrose's quote about how he's saying that mass originates from frequency. So that brings it back to the law of phase harmony of what Penrose relies on, which is the Einstein-Planck equation, which is what Louis de Broglie first established, for the law of phase harmony. It tells you that mass and frequency are basically equivalent. And so that's also the basis for Roger Penrose's quantum consciousness model. Because as Stuart Hameroff explains, if you're able to increase the frequency of your quantum consciousness, then where you actually see the blue light internally, then you're able to maintain this quantum non-locality as precognition for a longer time. And that's what enables these precognitive visions. And so I'll just leave it at that.